In the dusty heart of West Texas, where the sun baked the earth like a forgotten loaf of bread and the wind whispered secrets through the mesquite trees, Maria Alvarez stood trembling at the gate of the Lazy River Ranch. Her voice cracked like dry riverbed clay as she called out to the figure on horseback, "Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for work. Anything, really. I can clean, cook, mend fences, whatever you need." Her hands clutched a worn backpack, the only remnant of a life uprooted by betrayal and bad luck, and her eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, pleaded silently for a chance. Little did she know, this stranger in a weathered Stetson would shatter her expectations and rebuild her world with words she never saw coming. Maria had driven for hours under the relentless afternoon glare, her old pickup truck sputtering like an asthmatic mule. The gas gauge hovered on empty, mirroring her bank account, and the weight of her 2 young children back at the motel pressed on her chest like a boulder. At 35, she felt ancient, widowed young, laid off from the factory job that barely paid the bills, and now evicted from their cramped apartment in El Paso. Desperation had led her here, to this sprawling ranch advertised in a faded newspaper clipping as "hiring hands." She rehearsed her plea a dozen times in the rearview mirror, but now, facing the cowboy dismounting his horse with the grace of someone born to the saddle, her throat tightened. "Please," she added, her voice shaking anew, "I just need to feed my kids." The cowboy, Jack Harlan, wiped sweat from his brow with a bandana that had seen better days. He was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered and sun-leathered, with eyes as blue as a prairie sky after a storm. The ranch had been in his family for generations, but lately, it felt more like a burden than a blessing. His wife had passed 5 years ago from cancer, leaving him to raise their teenage daughter alone amid endless chores and mounting debts. Hired hands came and went like tumbleweeds, but none stayed long enough to ease the loneliness that echoed through the empty bunkhouse. He squinted at Maria, noting the dirt on her jeans and the determination in her stance despite the quiver in her words. "Work, huh?" he drawled, his Texas twang thick as molasses. "What makes you think I've got any to give?" Maria's heart sank, but she straightened her back, drawing on the resilience that had carried her through her husband's sudden death in a construction accident and the endless job hunts that followed. "I've got experience, sir. Grew up on a small farm in Mexico before we crossed over. I know horses, cattle, heck, I can even fix a tractor if it ain't too broke." She forced a smile, though it felt brittle. Inside, panic swirled. If this fell through, she'd have to beg on the streets or worse, call her estranged sister who lived a life of judgment in California. The cowboy tilted his head, studying her like he was appraising a steer at auction. Then, unexpectedly, he chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that caught her off guard. "Mexico, you say? My grandpa fought in the revolution down there. Said the folks were tougher than boot leather." The conversation flowed easier than Maria expected. Jack invited her to sit on the porch swing while he fetched lemonade from the kitchen, a simple act that felt like luxury after her parched drive. As they talked, she shared snippets of her story, the immigration hardships, the factory shutdown due to some corporate merger, the way her son, Miguel, dreamed of being a doctor but worried about school lunches. Jack nodded, his own tale spilling out, the ranch's struggle against droughts and falling beef prices, his daughter Emily's rebellious phase masking grief over her mother's loss. For the first time in months, Maria felt seen, not just as a beggar but as a person with a past and potential. Yet, doubt lingered, was this kindness or pity? When she finally mustered the courage to ask again about the job, her voice shook once more. "So, about the work. I saw your ad. I can start today." Jack set down his glass, his expression turning serious. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and looked her square in the eye. "Maria, your voice shook asking for work, and I get why. Life's kicked you around like a rodeo bull. But here's the thing." He paused, and her breath caught, bracing for rejection. "I don't need a servant." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, shocking her to her core. Her mind raced, what did he mean? Was this some cruel joke? She stood abruptly, ready to flee back to her truck, tears pricking her eyes. But Jack raised a hand, his voice gentle yet firm. "Hold on. I don't need a servant. What I need, what this ranch needs, is a partner. Someone to share the load, not just carry it." The revelation hit Maria like a cool breeze on a scorching day. Partner? She, a struggling immigrant with nothing but grit and 2 kids in tow. Jack explained, the ranch was too much for one man, and Emily needed a woman's influence, someone who understood loss and perseverance. He'd been praying for help, not in the form of a hired hand, but a real collaborator. "We could split the profits once we turn this place around," he said. "You bring your skills, your fire, and I'll teach you the rest. Your kids can stay in the guest house, plenty of room." It was an unexpected turn, a profound realization that kindness wasn't charity, it was recognition of shared humanity. Maria's defenses crumbled, and for the first time in years, hope flickered in her chest. But twists lay ahead. As Maria tentatively agreed to a trial week, doubts crept in. The first few days were grueling, mending fences under the blistering sun, herding cattle that seemed to sense her novice status, and navigating Emily's initial hostility. The girl, 16 and sharp-tongued, saw Maria as an intruder. "We don't need your help," Emily snapped one evening over dinner, slamming her fork down. "Dad's managed fine without you." Maria's heart ached, she saw her own daughter's defiance in Emily's eyes, a mirror of unresolved pain. That night, alone in the guest house with Miguel and little Sofia asleep, Maria questioned everything. Was this a mistake? Could she really belong here? The turning point came during a fierce thunderstorm that rolled in like an uninvited guest. Lightning cracked the sky, and rain pounded the roof like angry fists. In the chaos, a section of fence gave way, and several cows bolted toward the swollen river. Jack roused everyone, but Emily, in her stubbornness, rode out alone on her horse, determined to prove she didn't need anyone. Maria, spotting the danger from the porch, grabbed a raincoat and mounted a spare horse, her childhood skills rusty but instinctive. She galloped into the storm, her voice shouting over the wind, "Emily! Wait!" The girl had slipped in the mud, her horse spooked, and was clinging to a branch over the raging water. Maria dismounted, waded in waist-deep, and pulled her to safety with strength born of maternal fierceness. Back at the ranch, soaked and shivering, the emotional climax unfolded in the warm kitchen glow. Emily broke down, sobbing into Maria's arms. "I miss Mom so much," she confessed. "I thought if I was tough, it wouldn't hurt." Maria held her, whispering, "Toughness isn't hiding pain, it's sharing it." Jack watched, tears in his eyes, as bonds formed in that moment of vulnerability. His act of generosity, offering not just a job but a family, transformed them all. Maria realized she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, her selflessness mirrored in Jack's compassion. Over the following months, the ranch blossomed. Maria's innovative ideas, like starting a small organic garden and hosting community events, brought in extra revenue. Miguel helped with chores, dreaming bigger, while Sofia's laughter filled the once silent house. Emily and Maria grew close, like sisters separated by years, and Jack found joy in partnership, his grief softening into gratitude. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink, Jack turned to Maria on the porch. "You shook my world that day," he said. "Reminded me we're all just folks needing a hand up, not a handout." Maria smiled, her voice steady now. "And you showed me kindness isn't weakness, it's the strongest force there is." In that shared silence, the power of humanity shone bright, one act of selflessness rippling into lives forever changed. As the stars wheeled overhead, the Lazy River Ranch stood as a testament to hope. In a world often divided by borders and hardships, stories like theirs remind us that compassion bridges the gaps. No matter where we come from, be it dusty Texas plains or bustling cities across the USA, we all carry voices that shake with need. But when met with open hearts, those tremors become the foundation of something unbreakable, connection, renewal, and the unyielding belief. In the dusty heart of West Texas, where the sun baked the earth like a forgotten loaf of bread and the wind whispered secrets through the mesquite trees, Maria Alvarez stood trembling at the gate of the Lazy River Ranch. Her voice cracked like dry riverbed clay as she called out to the figure on horseback, "Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for work. Anything, really. I can clean, cook, mend fences, whatever you need." Her hands clutched a worn backpack, the only remnant of a life uprooted by betrayal and bad luck, and her eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, pleaded silently for a chance. The air was thick with the scent of sage and horse sweat, and in that moment, Maria felt the weight of her world teetering on the edge of this stranger's response. Little did she know, this cowboy in a weathered Stetson would shatter her expectations and rebuild her world with words she never saw coming. Maria's journey to this moment had been a long, arduous road. Born in a small village in northern Mexico, she had crossed the border as a teenager with her parents, dreaming of the American promise. They settled in El Paso, where her father worked the fields and her mother cleaned houses. Maria married young, to a kind man named Carlos who built homes for a living. They had Miguel first, then Sofia, and life seemed stable, until the accident. Carlos fell from a scaffold, leaving her a widow at 28. She took a job at a textile factory, stitching uniforms for 12 hours a day, but corporate greed closed it down 6 months ago. Eviction followed, and now, with her children in a rundown motel eating ramen for dinner, desperation clawed at her soul. The newspaper ad for ranch work was her last hope, a faded beacon in a sea of rejection letters. As the cowboy approached, Maria's knees weakened. He was tall, with a stride that spoke of authority earned through hard labor. Jack Harlan dismounted his bay mare, tying her to the fence post with practiced ease. His face was lined from years under the sun, but his eyes held a spark of something warm, perhaps curiosity or kindness. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "you look like you've come a ways." "Name's Jack. What brings you out here?" Her voice shook as she repeated her plea, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I saw your ad in the paper. I'm good with my hands, sir. Reliable. My kids, they're depending on me." She hated how vulnerable she sounded, but pride had long since been swallowed by necessity. Jack listened, his expression unreadable at first. Then, he gestured toward the ranch house, a sturdy adobe structure with a wraparound porch. "Come on up. Least I can do is offer you some water." Inside, the house was a blend of rustic charm and lived-in comfort, faded photos on the walls, a stone fireplace, and the faint smell of leather and coffee. Jack poured her a glass from a pitcher in the fridge, and they sat at the kitchen table. Maria sipped gratefully, her mind racing. This was more than she'd expected. Most potential employers dismissed her at the gate. As they talked, she opened up about her life, the struggles of single motherhood in a country that promised opportunity but often delivered obstacles. Jack shared too, his wife's battle with cancer, the way the ranch had become both his sanctuary and his prison. His daughter Emily was his world, but at 16, she was pulling away, lost in her own grief. The conversation stretched into the afternoon, the sun slanting through the windows like golden fingers. Maria felt a strange connection, as if this stranger understood her pain without judgment. When she pressed again about the job, her voice trembling with anticipation, Jack leaned back in his chair. "Maria, I've heard a lot of stories in my time, but yours, it hits close to home. Your voice shook asking for work, and I can see why. But I don't need a servant." The words landed like a punch, stunning her into silence. Tears welled up. Was this rejection after all that? She stood, murmuring thanks, ready to leave with her dignity in tatters. But Jack continued, his voice softening. "I don't need a servant. I need a friend, a partner in this madness. Someone who gets that life ain't about bossing or being bossed, it's about standing together." The unexpected turn left her reeling. A profound realization dawned, this wasn't pity, it was equality. Jack explained his vision. The ranch was struggling, but with fresh ideas, it could thrive. He'd been alone too long, and Emily needed a role model. Bring your kids. There's space, and work enough for all. We'll split what we make fair and square. Maria hesitated, but something in his eyes convinced her to stay for a trial. The first days were a whirlwind. She rose at dawn to feed the chickens, her muscles aching from unfamiliar tasks. Miguel, 8 and eager, helped with the horses, while Sophia, 5, played in the yard, her giggles a balm to the soul. Emily, however, was a storm cloud. "Who does she think she is?" the girl muttered to her father one night. Jack urged patience, but tension simmered. The unexpected twist came during a cattle drive. A young bull broke free, charging toward Sophia, who had wandered too close. Maria, spotting the danger, sprinted across the field, her heart pounding. She grabbed a rope from the fence and lassoed the beast with skills from her childhood, pulling it away just in time. Emily watched in awe, her hostility cracking. That evening, over a meal Maria cooked, enchiladas with fresh chilies from the garden, Emily apologized. "I was scared you'd replace Mom," she admitted. Maria hugged her. "No one's replacing anyone. We're just adding to the family." But the real climax built during the storm. The skies darkened, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. Rain lashed the ranch, and the river swelled. When the fence broke and cows escaped, Emily insisted on helping, riding out alone in defiance. Maria, sensing peril, followed. Finding Emily clinging to a branch over the torrent, Maria risked her life to save her, their hands clasping in the floodwaters. Back home, wrapped in blankets, the flood of emotions poured out. Emily wept, Jack confessed his fears, and Maria shared her own vulnerabilities. Jack's initial act of generosity, seeing Maria as an equal, ignited a chain of compassion that bound them. Months later, the ranch flourished. Maria's garden supplied local markets, Emily mentored Miguel in schoolwork, and Jack found love again, not romantic yet, but deep friendship. As they gathered for a harvest feast, laughter echoing under the stars, Maria reflected on how one shaken voice had led to this. The message was clear: in America's vast tapestry, from coast to heartland, kindness and selflessness weave the strongest threads. We all face storms, but extending a hand, as equals, turns strangers into saviors, despair into hope. And in that power of humanity lies our endless inspiration.